Hi everyone, I'm back for another video on how to break this game and how to make certain gap closers take you from point A to B pretty much instantly, right? You already saw it before, so I'm just going to talk about how you do this very quickly and what it is and everything. So this is definitely cheating, or categorized as an exploit, I suppose. I don't encourage actually doing this, but I think it's also incredibly funny and it's also informative to put out there how this works. So what you're doing is you're going to start your gap closer, and the frame after you start your gap closer, you're going to lock your frame rate to 2, and then you're going to leave it there for one more frame basically, and then it's going to get set back to normal, and then the game has a stroke in that whole time, because your gap closer was basically supposed to finish and it just teleports you to your final position immediately. I already saw it used in the intro, but here it is. That's what it looks like. It's very funny. So how I'm doing it is with this macro where I'm using the chill frames plugin from Dalamud. The convenient thing about this plugin is that you can enable and disable it with a chat command, which means that you can use it in macros. So you set the limit, the relevant one or both, to 2 FPS. And then in your macro, after using your gap closer, you do -PCF enable, and then you do -PCF disable. And that's how you do it. Doing it this way has one downside, which is that because you are always going to be spending 2 frames of your game on 2 FPS like this, basically the whole macro in its entirety, start to finish, takes 1.0 seconds. So if I press my macro, from the time of pressing it to me being able to do something else, it's always going to be 1.0 seconds, even though the actual animation lock of the gap closer is only 0.6 seconds. I'm sure there's like an external way, or like you could cook something where with setting custom frame times or something. I'm not a genius on this, but I'm sure there's a way to make it so that the macro, or like the cancel of your gap closer, takes a total of around 0.6 seconds or 0.7 seconds, and that would make it very slightly more flexible, and you could use it in slightly more situations. But as it works now, it doesn't hinder the way that you use it too much. So there's basically 2 situations where you could use this. The first is what you saw before. It's teleporting into chariots. So normally, a really big chariot, like a big AoE, is about to go off, and because your gap closer, the actual animation, has like a shift in hurt box for you, you cannot go into the chariot until it has snapshot. So what you can do is you can move to the max range of your gap closer, and then the chariot's happening like perfect half circle by me, absolutely stunning. It's happening over there, and like 0.1 seconds before this goes off, you can press your gap closer, you move over here with it, and then the snapshots, and then the rest of your gap closer goes through. But you still end up spending like 0.5 seconds in this case, wasted because of animation lock and the movement, even though the AoE has already snapshot. Now, if you're using this macro instead, as I said, if you're doing it this way, you're going to have a 1.0 second total delay. So there's a chariot, you can stand wherever you want to, and then 1.0 seconds before it snapshots, you're going to press your macro, and then you're standing here, and then this snapshots, and 0.1 seconds after, you teleport over here, and you can immediately roll your GCD because you're not in animation lock. That's the first way you can use it, and like the very funny cheater way. Another way that's more subtle, and it's still cheating, but like it's definitely less obvious, is with aggro range. So let's say the striking dummy has this aggro range. Most bosses in raids and stuff, they're going to have a proximity aggro range. How that works is if you enter the area where they're going to aggro, there's a tick around every 1.0 seconds. It's more like 0.9 seconds, I believe. It's like a little bit shorter, but let's just say it's 1.0 seconds. It's definitely around there. So you enter this area, and as soon as that 1 second tick happens while you're inside of the proximity area, you're going to get aggroed. If the tick doesn't happen, you don't get aggroed. So you can, you can go in here, you can walk around for 0.9 seconds and not get aggroed if you're really lucky. Or you can get aggroed immediately the moment you step inside. It just depends on the tick. So normally when you're gap closing at the start of combat, you're playing around this tick, right? So Wind Glide, the Dragoon Gap Closer, it has a travel time basically. It's not like linear, it's like a curve, but for you to start, like press the button and reach the target when you're on normal high FPS, it takes 0.45 seconds, and then the final 0.15 seconds of animation lock, you're just AFK standing here. So realistically, like let's say this is the aggro range, right? This is probably like 8 yalms or something. You could press it in this case, your gap closer, like 0.2 seconds before combat, and that way you will not spend a single moment of time in the aggro range before, the countdown finishes for your raid group. So there is zero risk of you early pulling, but the downside is you're always going to roll your GCD at 0.4 seconds, while your casters and stuff are starting at 0.0 seconds relatively. Now, you could just gap close sooner. You could gap close in this case at 0.6 seconds before the countdown finishes. That will make you finish your animation lock at 0.0 seconds, but you would have entered the aggro range at 0.4 seconds before the countdown, which means that there's a 40% chance that you early pull by any amount of 0.0 to 0.4 seconds. Basically balancing out like that risk of early pull-in and like how much GCD time you need to like roll an extra GCD and how greedy you want to be. You're basically balancing these things out to determine at what time you should gap close in terms of like high-end optimization. If you're using this macro, however, all of that just gets thrown out the window. You have a countdown on your screen. It doesn't matter where the aggro range is. You just go wherever. Countdown hits 1.0 seconds. You press your macro, and at 0.0 seconds, you're always going to just teleport in front of the boss, like that, and press your GCD. And you can always completely save without ever early pulling. You can roll your GCD at least 0.0. Okay, I lost track of what I was talking about, don't mind me. But yeah, basically, it makes it so you can pull very consistently, like especially in like a setting where you care about group damage, like speed killing or something. It's very important that you're able to pull like at 0.0. You don't want to early pull in these kind of scenarios, basically. You can do so without any sacrifice very consistently with using this. But especially like if you're trying to go for like a personal damage, then you can also just greed way more. You could potentially roll a GCD up to 1.0 seconds before combat, a melee GCD, which you would never be able to do otherwise. But even if you're trying to roll something less than that, it just makes it way more likely to succeed. So that's why it's so good. So then, last thing that I want to kind of talk about is how this looks for other people. You will definitely get reported if you are going into chariots. So I think this one, yeah. So this is for my friend. This is what it looks like when you're using this. So this AoE, I'm going to use the macro and quote unquote teleport into this AoE. Yeah, that's very suspicious. And then, I mean, it looks like I get hit here. But I'm not sure. But that's just the party cones. Here's my POV. It's just like proof. There you go. You can see me doing the thing as well. So yeah. But people will know. And this is why it's very bad for like party finder and stuff. First of all, if you're doing this in random party finders, people are going to see and be suspicious of you. As they should, because you shouldn't be doing this. But if you're trying to use this at the start of combat, it's going to say like, you're probably going to greed this, right? So you're probably going to press your gap closer at like 1.2 seconds on the countdown, like minus 1.2 seconds, which is mad early. You're going to be staring the boss, like on their screen, you're just going to be standing here staring at the boss for more than half a second. Like on your screen, it's normal, right? On your screen, you're like only showing up here at the actual relevant point. But on their screen, it looks really, really weird. And it's going to do one of two things. Either it's going to tempt them to also pull way earlier because they think you're going to early pull. So they're going to pull earlier to compensate. So they're not getting cucked. Either that, or they'll just get pissed at you. One of the two, realistically. So yeah, I mean, that at least balances it out. But if anything, I think that's why it makes it more important that I make a video about this. Because the only people who can really abuse this are people in like speed kill groups and stuff. So if you ever in the future you see someone who's somehow hidden GCDs after like AoEs and stuff that they shouldn't be able to, or they're somehow they're rolling their GCD really early on a boss that they shouldn't be able to, or they're super consistently rolling their GCD very early, then you know what they might be doing. So anyway, that's that. It's very funny. Oh, I forgot one thing. Other jobs. Right. So this doesn't work for every gap closer. One thing that I found at least is that it doesn't work for non-targeted gap closers. So for elusive jump, it didn't work for me. For ethereal shift on white mage, it didn't work for me. And then, for example, Stardiver obviously didn't work for. Dragonfire, I have that one here so I can show you. This is what it looks like when it doesn't work. Right? It is still better, I believe, for most of these. It is still better than doing a default gap closer, like a vanilla gap closer. But it's not teleporting. So I think what this has to do with is the movement curve of a specific ability. Or it has to hit a certain point in the animation. Like the curve has to be very specific, and that causes the actual teleport. So I also tried this on very quickly. I don't really care that much about trying this for other jobs. I tried that on Gyoten for Samurai. That does not work. Doing it vanilla. I think you can fix this with like custom frame time stuff, as I said before. You just have to make it like delay it by a couple frames, like by like a couple milliseconds or something, and that could fix it. The one that I've tried next that did work is Intervene for Paladin, as you can see. That one works very well. Just like Dragoon, you just go immediately into range. So this one does do damage, just like Dragonfire and Gyoten. So dealing damage is not what causes it to or to not work. But yeah. I think that's everything then. So thank you for watching, you know, seasonal Ciora content as I disappear again. Don't blame me if people use this or something. I don't know, don't get mad at me. Love you. Bye.